Good morning, everybody. It's Simon here from Pumpkin Incorporated. Today, very excited to have the king of innovation. You probably won't, he'll kill me for saying that. It's Elvin Turner, who has written the most brilliant book, which is Be Less Zombie. And that's what we're going to talk to him about today. Good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm very well, thank you. I'm really excited to be part of this show today.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So I've read the book, and what I really loved about it was that, you know, I'm quite creative. I love new ideas. I love moving things forward, and I think it gives you a really solid basis to understand how to be more innovative. But equally, you matched it really well with the people side of it, and of course, that really ticks my box. Understanding there's some strong processes and ways of being strategically and as an organisation, but you've got to take the people with you, and you've got to have the right people doing it in the right way. So what I want to know is what made you decide you wanted to get this book out there and write it sort of based on that?
Yeah, well, what I was finding that so the work that I do tends to fall into two categories. One is helping organizations design innovation strategy and put an ecosystem in place where this stuff can start to show up more inevitably, rather than it being a fight all of the time to get innovation and big ideas out there. And the second half of what I do is actually leadership and management development, helping leaders sometimes do this stuff for the first time. What are the skills, the capabilities, the mindset that you need? And I was often finding that when I went into a client for the first time, a leader would say to me, listen, you're probably going to try and sell me something, which I might be true. Don't tell me why we need to innovate. Don't tell me what we need to innovate. Just tell us how, because it just continually seems to slip through our fingers. So there's this big thing around the how of innovation. And, you know, there's tons of really great innovation books out there, but I was finding that not many of them were really gelling with people because they were quite academic or quite, you know, meaty to get through and not necessarily very practical. So I thought, I would love to be able to have a resource that I can hand to people and say, you know, even when I'm not here, here is a handbook that can at least get you to first base in lots of different areas so that innovation becomes a bit more inevitable rather than it becoming this, you know, I talk about innovation being an argument. So that was the real motivation, because I really want to see people be able to innovate more, and to provide a resource that is super practical and as jargon free as possible was the real intention there.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think, you know, I hadn't sort of thought of it like that, but as it is a handbook, you can pick it up and flick through it in perfect sections, go, well, where am I right now? What do I need to do here? What do I need to do here? I mean, I think that's kind of a next sort of good sort of question to follow on with, really, is, you know, people are asking me, well, who's it for? Okay, who's this book for? Because innovation and ideas is for anyone. I mean, I personally think it could be an individual with a small business. It could be a leader with a team that's got to be moving ideas forward, or extending right the way to a full business at the top. You know, how does our business innovate? So, how would you, if I had a copy today and I said, what's the best way to use it, do you think?
Well, I mean, if you think about today, you know, the context where this is being recorded, we're starting to come out of COVID, and inevitably people have been in a, you know, keep the lights on mode. And so, you know, in the book, there are some ideas on things like idea generation and business model generation, which are helpful right now. But I think so that there's keeping the lights on it. And to be really honest, when I'm talking to clients right now, they haven't really got time to think much beyond how do we just stay alive today. And I completely get that. However, I would say it's interesting to look back to the last recession, and you see WhatsApp was born, Pinterest was born, Uber was born. I wouldn't be surprised if right now Facebooks are being born. When the dust settles from this earthquake, you know, there are going to be some really interesting new players. Now, you could say that happens all the time. Yeah, but I also think that what is happening, everyone's talking about this new normal, whatever that means. There are going to be some new things that crop up that are opportunities for companies to move quickly into new areas. So it's that keep the lights on, but don't forget about the questions that tomorrow needs us to answer today. And there are some big potential opportunities there. So I'd say for COVID, that would be one thought. I think from a more day-to-day point of view, though, what the book is really designed to do is to help anyone at any level, really. It really is kind of a guerrilla handbook at one level where anyone can switch it on, but it's really trying to help leaders answer that question of how, and to build in innovation as a more inevitable outcome, as I said earlier. And that often starts with leaders stepping away from management and into leadership, thinking more about who do we need to become, what's changing, what isn't changing. Therefore, how should we recalibrate around the opportunities that are coming, the trends that are coming our way? And we tend to think, well, that will just kind of take care of itself. It really doesn't. Innovation will not show up inside your organization unless you're deliberate about it. And one of the things I really try and advocate at the start of the book is for leaders to really take a look at themselves and say, you know, how much are you really involved in the day-to-day stuff where you shouldn't be? It's your comfort zone. It's the stuff that you love. It's not really what the role of the leader should be. It should be to be looking to the future, defining strategy. And I often find that execs don't often like doing that stuff. They actually find it a little bit boring because they like the cut and the thrust of doing the job. And I get that. But from a stewardship point of view, that means every moment you spend looking at today, you're robbing something from the future. So really the book is trying to give you some practical tools to grasp hold of that stuff and try and pull more of tomorrow into today.
Yeah, I think one of the first chapters is you know, what does the future actually look like? You know, because we can't really predict it. But here we are in a situation where I've been using the word, you know, evolve. You know, there's so many companies have had to. Well, they have a choice. They have a choice. They can do nothing and just, as you say, keep the lights on until it all gets to to normal, wherever it is. They can perhaps implement some learnings from this and make some changes. But then I think there's the organisations who will go, this is an opportunity. We need to evolve into something completely different. Maybe that's because of their product base doesn't fit with the face-to-face world anymore or whatever. So I think that's where this kind of book would be vital now. I think if you were thinking about, I need to evolve as a business, or we as a team, how do we do that? How do we start thinking like that? So I think that's where it fits in there. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the case. And you know, let's be fair. Who'd want to be a leader right now of a large complex organization or even a small one, trying to figure out what comes next? So I think all the help you can get to put some frameworks down, some tools down, just to help you think more clearly through this season. Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Where are we going to go to next on that? Well, we've got a few questions to do, so let's do those because I think it will cover some of the things we've been talking about already. So glasses on. So the first one is from Keith Merrin, and he says, "What tips and ideas does Elvin have for a newly appointed manager to engage with and inspire a reluctant and downtrodden team into creating ideas and moving forwards to taking greater ownership for their own future?"
Yeah. There's a few thoughts on that. I mean, the first thing I would always, so my worlds that collide are innovation, change, and leadership. And I guess I've been doing that for quite a long time. And I've worked with a lot of disillusioned teams that have been done to for a long time and are just stuck. And what I've observed is that often, well, when I've seen a new manager come in and do well, the first thing they've done is listen. Surprise, surprise. It's start to build trust. And very often what I've found is working with teams is they know a lot of the stuff that needs to be done anyway. It's not like there's a lack of new ideas. There's a frustration with not being able to do anything about them. So the first thing that I would say is go and meet your team and listen and understand them and say, you know, what makes this team tick? You know, what gets in the way? Where's the friction in this team? What drives you nuts? What are the things that you've always wanted to be doing but you can't do? And that takes a little bit of time if you've got really cynical people. But generally, I find, apart from the 10% who are always glass empty, he's not even half empty, most people want to do a good job. And if you can show up and say, listen, I want to help you do your career's best work as far as I can, I'm here to facilitate, you've got that servant perspective. That's really refreshing for the first thing. But then also trying to discover, well, who are you? What are your potential superpowers? How can I draw those out of you and develop you so that you're doing your best work? That's all fertile ground then for innovation and creativity. And I think as part of that, you can then start to understand what part of the innovation process are these people going to be really great at. He's obviously someone who's really good at coming up with the big ideas. She's a real implementer and refiner. And you're starting to understand along that journey of innovation, here's how people can show up. So you're creating an environment, I guess, for success where people feel trusted. And that's the second thing is, you've got to be a safe place to innovate around as a leader and a manager. And that means when you say to people, okay, well, here's the stuff that we're all saying needs to change. I give you permission to do that. And in return for, accountability for results, you need to show up as a safe place to fail around if things don't quite go so well, because the response that a manager has to mistakes determines so much about what innovation will happen in your team. So I always like to ask the question when I'm running a session is, to what extent are you a safe place to fail around? I mean, I would rather reframe it as to learn around, because we often learn through failure. So I think there's a few things you can do, but for me, it's about, be less zombie, could have been called be more human. Yeah. It's about how do we create that rich, fertile, connected place where we're really trying to build trust so that we can do our best work, some of which will involve some eggs being broken, but we're okay. We can get over that. We can connect because there's a bigger picture, which is about connection in the long term so that we can do our best work. Those are some thoughts.
Yeah.
But now, what do you think?
Well, funny enough, as you were talking there, the reason we're talking is because you're be less zombie, I'm be more punk. They're our hashtags, aren't they? And but when you were just talking there, the punk values I talk about are be anti-okay. Okay is not good enough. When there's somewhere else we can go. So be anti-okay is one. Another is boot out bullshit. And what that means is that you're probably doing things that you could do better, or you shouldn't be doing at all. So it's like fostering that environment, and that's from a leadership perspective. That's what I want them to do, and then be yourself. So not bring an authenticity into it. We're going to start doing some different stuff. We're going to learn to do something new, and I believe in it, and I'm going to be there with you. So not just leading from the top. And then you were just talking about a safe place. Well, one of the other values is be wrong. And what I mean by that is not be wrong, but be prepared to be wrong.
Yeah.
Show a level of vulnerability because it leads to better ideas. It leads to questions being asked because there's a space for it.
Well, I would even take it further than that. In the book, I say that there is a connection between personal vulnerability, your ability, your willingness to put something on the table that challenges the status quo, and then to be able to advance it. That requires a level of vulnerability. It requires a level of vulnerability from your boss to then sponsor it. So the vulnerability at individual and team level has a direct implication on the commercial vulnerability of the business. Because if the ideas that tomorrow needs are not coming forward because people don't feel vulnerable enough, we've got this big car crash showing up. So I think you're absolutely right. That willingness to be teachable and humble enough to be wrong and say, okay, what can I learn from this is huge, I think.
Yeah, I think it's funny because even leads on to the next punk value, which is smash VUCA. And VUCA's that phrase that's been around for a while, vulnerability, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Well, more than ever, our environments are VUCA, and then COVID came along and that's all it was. I mean, from day-to-day basis, we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. So again, from a leadership perspective, that they need to step up and start showing they're capable of navigating that environment and being more human about it, because that's what gives downtrodden teams more confidence. That's where reluctant team members start feeling more bolstered and want to talk to us.
Yeah, yeah.
It's interesting how the two sort of link together there.
Mm.
Okay, next question. So actually, this was from Marta Jacob, which you've already answered, to be honest, in the comments. So I'll read it through, and people should take a look at the original post. But she said, "Why do you think that people are so scared about failing early on a project idea, but are totally relaxed about losing lots of money on it at later stages? And how do you turn this behaviour around?" So do you want to give it a minute just to...
Yeah. I mean, it's a gambling question, really, and it's all about stakes. And I see broadly two categories of innovation inside organisations. There is winner takes all, zero game, cannot fail, huge projects that attract big investment right from the start. And then there's the lower stakes, which is where you're starting with experimentation. The first one, ironically, once you're through the first gate, well, it's funny, fear starts to show up in different ways, and I've written in the post a little bit more about that. I think that the key point in the question really is what's the opposite to that, and that is lower stakes. For me, fear is one of the biggest things that stops innovation happening inside organizations. And it's a funny word. People don't like to talk about it or even acknowledge it, I've found. But there's often I don't know whether you see this, but a subtle sort of culture of underlying fear in lots of places inside organizations. So lowering the stakes, making the first step safer, and for you to be a safe place, to innovate and to innovate around and to take innovation to your boss, is a good first step. And that is about how can we take an idea, look at the assumptions that need to be true in order for that idea to actually succeed, and test those assumptions before we spend a ton of money building something that might fail anyway. So it's this idea of not spending 50K building a prototype pilot or whatever, it's spending 50 quid. Let's test that underlying assumption with the smallest, fastest experiment to give us data to understand, is this something that we should continue? It's pay as you go. So the risk is lower, and therefore the willingness to step into risk is higher.
Right. I mean, I think that experimentation bit, I mean, it was one of my sort of light bulb moments in the book, I think, to go, oh God, that's it. It's just it's looking at it and going, well, where are we going? Let's just do something small and fast. I mean, I know in the agile project management world, I mean, the iterative development sort of matches that. But what I liked about it was that it made it more, I don't know, just talking about experimentation, it made it more accessible. I wasn't thinking about it as a project management tool, or, it was just kind of, oh yeah, let's just do a small thing here.
Yeah.
If it works. And it's quite exciting to work that way.
Well, I have to say, I think it's one of the, I mean, this all came from this book. The Lean Startup all started here a few years back. The stuff in here, if you've never read this book, if you haven't got time to read it, go onto YouTube and just look for a talk by this guy, Eric Ries. It'll all be in there in half an hour anyway. But this idea of small experiments, I've seen to be probably the single most powerful idea for getting innovation happening, democratizing innovation inside organizations, because the stakes are suddenly low. Confidence then increases at a leadership level to, well, yeah, let's let people have a go. And there was a point where I was working with an organization in the UK for a while, where they made the complete flip at the leadership level. And the CEO would say to people, listen, don't bring me ideas. Ideas are 10 a penny. Bring me an experiment that you've run. Just start. I trust you enough to try something very small. Bring me the data from the experiment and tell me what we should do next. What's your recommendation? That is a flip of all kinds of things around hierarchy and empowerment and all sorts of things. But it's really coming from a smart place, because it's allowing the data to be much more objective. It stops pet projects or reduces the likelihood of them. And anyway, it's just something that I've seen make innovation fly very quickly because the stakes are low.
That's it. That's really interesting, because often I've done, when I work with, say, the MDs or COOs at the top level, and they'll often say to me, yeah, we need to get them some training, because what I need them to do is they come to me with ideas that they just don't fly. And they're, or they're too woolly, or there's not enough facts, or there's not enough data. And I'm getting really fed up with having hour-long presentations to me where within the first 5 minutes, I know I'm going to blow it out of the water and say, no. I think, that experimentation, okay, look, go out and do it and come back to me with the facts and with the data and show me it has potential. And I'm much more likely to say, yes, let's go, let's do it. There's definitely a need there for, I think, leaders to behave that way. But I guess it is.
And I think what I'd add to that as well, I hear the same things, is teaching people how to put together a simple business case as well. And in the book, I've got, there's 10 things that you put around a simple business case. Often leaders don't tell people what they want to hear. So, so teach them to experiment, teach them the basics of creating a business case around an experiment, and it would change so much when it does.
The other thing it will address is that fear factor.
Yeah.
So I think, the experimentation definitely addresses people don't come up with ideas because they don't want to be told it's rubbish. They don't want to affect their career or whatever way it might go. But with working on something like that, that fear should reduce, because you know what you're doing and what you're presenting back. And I think a lot of the fear probably comes from, I've got a great idea, but what if they don't think it is one? Well, prove it.
I was doing some work for one of the big record companies once, and we did this kind of playback. We had like a boot camp for a week where we were teaching sort of high potential people, 60 people, how to do this stuff. Then they had to go away for 2 or 3 months, run some experiments, and then come back and pitch to the bosses. And the CEO of the whole company, halfway through, kind of lost control a little bit. He was an older guy, he's in his 70s, and he just came up and grabbed the mic and he said, "This stuff is unbelievable. I haven't seen this stuff. This is the sort of stuff I've been waiting for 30 years." And it was a bit of a funny moment, but on reflection, thinking, actually, all we've done is lower the stakes. We've made it possible for people to step into the things that the bosses have been asking for, because now the stakes are lower. So I haven't seen it not work yet when it's been set up well.
Yeah, brilliant. You just jogged the memory that I ran a team building company for many years, and we used to do that version of The Apprentice / sort of Dragon's Den, where they had, but often when they had 2 hours to present something they had to work a bit harder on, it was amazing what they churned out, because I'd send them off to do research and they come back and they almost were doing these little experiments. But anyway, okay, brilliant. Let's do the next question. So this is from Trevor Gordon, and he said, people are the heart of innovation and it requires everyone to innovate. Where would you focus your attention to? 1, ubiquitous innovation, and 2, what would be your chosen measure to monitor outputs?
Okay, there's quite a lot here. I've actually, because I knew this question was coming, I've written a few points down here. So the first thing, to answer the first thing about how do you ubiquitize innovation, I think a few things. First, be clear on what you're asking for. So from it sounds obvious. What's the strategy? What are the questions that we need to answer in order for us to deliver the strategy? And some of those questions are going to require a kind of a portfolio approach. Some of them are, well, let's just do some incremental innovation. How do we make this 5% faster every year? Some of them are going to be, but 5% on its own is not going to get us to where we need to be. We need some game-changing ideas in there. And you calibrate questions according to the outcome that you need. So if you need a 500% improvement in something, build that into a question. We need to be able to deliver 500 times the revenue in this with half the resource. What? You'll be surprised what happens when you put that out there. So anyway, it's being very clear on the question we're asking. That'll be the starting point. Secondly, we've just covered this, give people some basic tools. One around creativity, because we are really not very good at creating an environment where human beings can do their best creative work. It's like deadlines, we've got 30 minutes in a brainstorm. Come on, knock it out, switch on the creativity. Doesn't work like that. And we have to be real about how we build humanity into the creative process. We're not robots. You can't just switch it on, particularly big ideas. So there's something about that, but also teach people experimentation, teach people the basics of how to design and run a really great experiment. So what's the question we're trying to solve? What idea, then what experiment can we run? Give people a simple process. Often I ask people, what's the process like here? If you have an idea, what do you do next? I don't know. Take it to my boss. I mean, people really don't know. So have a process, have something somewhere where it feeds into a system and comes out again very quickly with some feedback. Give people freedom for accountability. I often run these one-day workshops where people come with ideas. I beat them up, tear them to pieces, and then we put them back together again, and they go off, and they come to me at the end often and say, oh, that's a really great day. But do you know what? The thing that I really liked about today was it reminded me why I got into this business in the first place. It's about building the future. It's about reminding ourselves who the customer is. And people love being given the freedom to go and create the future. Brilliant. So give people freedom to do that for accountability. But I think the thing that has to happen around all of this for it to work is there needs to be a commercial objective in place that runs right through the organization, because we get what we measure for. If we're not measuring for innovation, if we're not putting a demand on senior managers, line managers, and then at team level for innovation to show up, work feels to expand the time available. The status quo eats innovation every day because we don't make time for it. So you have to measure for it and make space for it. And that can be done, but it's a choice. And it's a hard choice because we don't like to step away from the certainty of, but if they work harder and turn the handle faster, we get more output. Well, that'll keep you going for a bit. But when that wave of disruption comes that you didn't make time for, we'll be wishing we made some different choices 3 years ago. So I'd say that will be the first thought around how do you help it to be a bit more ubiquitous. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on where you've seen that work.
Well, I have seen it work, funnily enough, where I worked for an insurance company for a few years, and they were pretty good at behaving in a fairly innovative way. And one of the things they did with ideas was they had a system where you could plug an idea in on the internet, and then people could upvote it or downvote it. And then what happened was, the more it gathered pace, once it got to a certain period of time, they took the top 5 and then they took them away to a panel where they gave them a really good think through and said, well, is this really going to work? What actually is it going to achieve? Is it going to be financial, process improvement, people, focus? And then if they put them into practice, they awarded the people with a financial reward for it, and a little sort of little trophy as well. Always implemented them. And if they didn't, they fed back to everyone on why it wouldn't work. So that does generate that sort of space, doesn't it, for people to think about ideas?
That software now, there's so many platforms around that are really good. I think I know the one you're talking about. I would always really recommend that. I mean, some teams start simple. I worked for another insurance company where they just did it in Excel. They did it at team level and they shared. I mean, it's very simple and it's not as effective in terms of getting engagement with other people. But what you've just described is a really simple way to have the whole, every brain in the company focused on the biggest problems we're trying to solve. It makes a lot of sense, and it's all sorts of side benefits from that we could talk about a lot.
He also mentioned, what would your chosen measure be to monitor outputs?
I mean, the first question I would always ask in response to that is the framework for it is, what needles are we trying to move? Both in terms of, pick a needle. Is it growth? Is it efficiency? Is it people engagement? What are we trying to move towards? And then thinking about leading and lagging indicators. So when you think about, I don't know, let's say we need 40% more growth in a certain area. Okay, that's going to require a level of disruptive idea that is not going to do well in the status quo. So we need to create an environment where that can show up. But then it's about the leading indicators around that might be, okay, well, number of ideas that come through the system, number of experiments we run, number of experiments that make it out. So you're trying to figure out, how do we measure the innovation process well, so that idea, and how do we resource it well so that we've got a greater chance of ideas showing up? And then lagging indicators, well, is this thing working? And I always come back to, I really like, it's been around for a while now, but the way that 3M think about how they measure innovation, which is, and we talk about it a little bit in the book, 30% of sales from products that didn't exist 4 years ago. And if the board really holds themselves to account around that, innovation of certain levels and profiles has to show up, and it's then that comes back down through the organization on metrics and who needs to deliver what. It kind of draws innovation out of us because it's part of our objectives. So I think, you know, we said earlier, you get what you measure. What needles are we trying to move? And therefore, what do we need to measure in order to pull that forward? And it's going to be different in every organization, but I would often say it's just a choice. Be deliberate about the amount of innovation that you need and work back from there, and then ask what needs to be true, and then put measures and metrics around those things so that you lock it in place. So yeah, there was some starting thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I guess what that helps your thinking there, what helps frame it for me, is that if you're a larger organization, you need to be building this stuff in, like you said, the 30% of 3M. Okay, you've got to be building it in, so it's what we do every day. You know, we're always innovating, even if we don't always call it that, because, you know, whereas people in like a running a small business like me, perhaps often think, well, oh, I'm just doing this all the time anyway, or I know I'm going to have to move at some point. I'm going to have, but I don't think we add the structuring. I don't think we build it in enough. So I think your individual, your smaller business needs to think, because they may think, oh, we're quite agile anyway and we'll move. But I still think you need to be thinking ahead. So I can sort of see how it works on both fronts there. Yeah. Okay, next question. It's another one from Marta, and we probably have covered this a little, but she says, there seems to be a missing conduit between leadership wanting great ideas and employees wanting to help the businesses with their ideas. In the new circumstances of survival depending on innovation, can you recommend an approach for executives to enable great ideas to land on fertile ground, possibly delivering faster?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we just talked about starts to wander into that area a little bit, and that is make space for it.
Yeah.
This in the book, we have this picture of this great big sumo wrestler called the status quo, and there's this weedy little guy trying to fight him called innovation. And that's what it's like. You know, inside most organizations, we don't make enough deliberate space for innovation to show up. The status quo dominates. And unless we're deliberate about making space, resources, the processes, the culture that certain types of idea need to show up, then you can't expect it to happen by magic. I mean, quite often you go into an organization and the leader is saying to me, it's not that we don't have enough innovation, it's that we don't have enough of the right kind. I open the big idea cupboard and it's empty. So you've got to make space for things to show up that can't naturally show up in an environment that's only really designed for optimizing today. So the first thing, I guess, is making space. I guess that's from a leadership point of view. I would always challenge people, though, because it's hard. It does depend on your environment. Sometimes I feel people are a little bit passive about it. And I think we can take a different view on how we represent innovation that gives it a better chance of success. So what do I mean by that? I talk in the book about being a thought leader. And I don't necessarily mean someone who's coming up with a grand vision of the future. It's more, you need to lead other people's thinking. You need to help them come to the same conclusion as you. And really, you're a campaign manager for your idea. And a lot of this comes down to real stakeholder management and thinking about, well, here's the idea, here's the fear, here are the anxieties, here are the challenges that I know this will create in the 7 stakeholders who I need their support to get through this. So I need to be strategic and work back and think, okay, to get to base 1, what experience do I need to create for those people so that they have the beliefs that will cause them to act in favor of this idea? Bearing in mind that this idea could still be wrong and I need to be open to their input. But you really have to take much more ownership of really great stakeholder campaign management, so that people can really engage with that. And I talk a lot in the book about different kinds of elevator pitch and things you can come up with, just to help you get through that process. So I think there's something there. And I think that the other thing I'd add, which is related to that, again, in the book, I talk about, it's leaders in the book, but this can be anybody, is you are a user experience. You are, you think about products, we design great user experiences. Well, then you are a user experience.
Yeah.
So you are going to present your product, your idea, whatever. You need to think about the experience that people have of you as much as just the product they're creating. Do I trust that girl to move that thing forward? Do I trust that guy to be the one who's going to do what he's saying he's doing here? And, you know, we break down trust into competency and character and all sorts of things. Often it's, is that a safe person to take this idea forward? And you need to be thinking, and you need to ask yourself some tough questions sometimes and think, actually, I know that manager thinks this about me. It's probably better that I hand this idea at this stage to this person who has a better brand, you know, equity relationship with them, and get them to get it through to the next base. So some of this is deeply human, in helping. Again, it's about safety. How do I help that person feel safe to say yes? Work back from that point and say what needs to be true. So I think there's a lot in this around just the humanity of it, having had space made for it by the leaders.
Great. Yeah, great. I mean, you know, the hearts and minds piece of, well, if it's not just if it's just an idea being pushed forward, it becomes just a project.
Yeah.
And then until it has that level of humanity attached to it, so we know what journey it's taking and via whom, and what it's going to need to keep going on it, you just have a project that people are just shoving through as hard as they can, and we know people push back as soon as you give them an opportunity on something, especially if they don't particularly like you or your idea. So yeah, great. I mean, it makes perfect sense. It's just
I heard a guy, well, I was working with a bank, and well, I was working it was for eBay actually, and we brought in a kind of load of speakers to do some, just to bring stimulus. And these guys came in from one of the big banks, and they were talking about how they run experiments. And this guy said, my number one tip, and he said, when you're presenting to executives, take progress, not PowerPoint.
Cool.
What do you mean by that? He said, just take the thing you're working on and show them what you've done. People love to look at a thing. They love to look at, you know, what this thing is you're talking about. Now take your slides because you might need them, but you'll often find you don't, because people just want to see, okay, we've gone from A to B. Oh, I like this. Maybe we need to tweak that. Okay, and we're done. And I thought that was quite a neat trick, because how long do we spend crafting our PowerPoint slides, you know, within an inch of their life? And they're quite dull meetings. So progress instead of PowerPoint. I thought that was a really nice tip.
Yeah, that's really nice. Sometimes when I do training around presentations, we always talk about how, and it's always PowerPoint, but bring a thing people can look at. You know, we all have a thing. As soon as someone says, I've got something to hand out to you, oh, have you? You know, and even watching things like Dragon's Den, how excited are they when a thing is handed to them that they can look at? It's so much more interested. So it's it's really good.
Actually, you just reminded me one more quick thing on just to answer Martha's question. The Dragon's Den thing is interesting. If you have got an organization that is so locked down and it's hard to get your idea out of your team and even above the team, you know, the layer above, one thing I've seen work well is for the leadership team who are asking for the big ideas and never seeing them actually because they're hidden downstairs somewhere, is to have regular, you know, monthly pitch sessions. So for an hour, book a slot, you can come in and you can pitch whatever you like. And that helps to circumvent some of the hierarchy. Doesn't mean it causes some pain when you get back to your desk and your boss says, what have you done? That's overcomable, but it is a way to set an expectation that bigger ideas are allowed to be pitched, and they then may come downstream. I wouldn't say it solves everything, but it can help as part of a wider push to create an environment where innovation is more likely to show up.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. This is from Tabitha Ward. And Tabitha said, the massive ecosystem of information online, especially now, can lead to stagnation with my clients, business owners and leaders, and creates hurdles to strategic action. I'd love insight on how to encourage shifting the focus towards innovation.
Again, I think this comes back down to what needles are we trying to move? Where do we need to go? Who do we need to become? And therefore, what needs to be true? And often we're not asking those big questions inside organizations. We're stuck in the minutiae of the day to day. And I think one of the healthiest things that you can do, really almost regardless of the size of your company, is to think about having an innovation portfolio. What are the big questions we're trying to answer? And what are the incremental questions, therefore, that anyone can solve at any time and just put into practice? But making time and space for the bigger ideas that will not show up in the status quo unless we're deliberate about them. One of the things we talk about in the book is an idea called rehearsal space. And I came across this idea when I was interviewing someone who works on the show The X Factor. So, there's the bit where the star or the artist they do verse 1, chorus 1, verse 2, chorus 2, and then the curtains open up and there's a choir and it all comes to a crescendo. Well, she runs the choirs, and she talks about performance space. You're on stage, the lights are on, we're recording, you cannot screw up. And that's the day-to-day business. We should be totally optimized. We shouldn't be making too many mistakes because cause and effect are relatively well understood. But then there's the rehearsal space where we are being deliberate about, okay, we can try new stuff. We can improvise here. And if it goes wrong, it's fine. We'll just dust ourselves off and we'll go up and go. The stakes are low and motivation is high. So creating more rehearsal space, whatever that looks like for you, and the values that hold that in place, aligned with some questions that we're trying to solve, starts to create a playing field where people can start to do more innovation that's likely to show up.
Yeah, it's you prompted a thought there that, again, often when I'm having a conversation about learning and development or leadership development with an organization, my question isn't what do you want them to learn? It's what does the company need to achieve? Where is it going? What are your main objectives? How much money do you want to earn? What is, where are you going with it? Because people are going to be the people who drive this forward, so I need to know that question. So you're right. It's getting, again, that's the question we need to answer via the learning and development and the leadership development. Similarly, like what you just said there, where are you going? What do you need? And how will innovation be part of that? Because if you're not answering the right question, you're not asking the right question, you're not focusing on the right thing. So yeah, superb. Okay, last one.
Okay.
Jackie Clark, how do you think leadership strategy will change now that times have changed? And how does he think companies can stay ahead of innovation while everyone is being forced to be more innovative due to the recent situation?
Well, it's interesting. I really hope that what's happening right now will create a more determined approach and view from leaders to help innovation show up more deliberately. I don't know whether it will really happen, though. I think we're in a moment right now where we're in survival, and that will calm down, hopefully. I think we have short memories, and I wouldn't be surprised if we go back to usual, the old ways of working in many areas quite rapidly, and that will include status quo being in charge of everything that we do. So, I'm hopeful, not that expectant that much will really change. And to be honest, some of that is because, and I feel for leaders, because they're often promoted to their level through excellence through their career. They've achieved stuff, whether it's functionally or whatever in the business, but that's usually about running the status quo really well. Rarely have they really been through an experience or through some really good training that has got application to it as well, that teaches them how to run an environment, a mixed portfolio. Incremental is easy to run. The bigger stuff, that requires a very different mindset. And as you were talking about earlier, Simon, VUCA and that requirement to be able to let go more, explore more, know that you cannot know the answer, and smart people don't like not knowing the answer. Is, you know, teaching smart people to learn. There's a great book about that somewhere. That requires a different way of leading, and yet we expect, because leaders of their, by virtue of their position, we expect them to know how to run innovation, and we really shouldn't. So I think there's something in here, which is one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is we need to equip our leaders with the skills that are going to get us to tomorrow, because things are, the scope of change is wider and faster than ever before. We can't expect that just doing more of the same is going to get us there. So you would hope that that provides enough motivation to want to go and do this stuff. I think people are too busy to make the space for it. And that's usually the starting point I ask, you know, with the leadership team is, you've got to stop doing stuff so that this stuff can show up, which is what we talked about earlier. And you look at Amazon and people like Jeff Bezos, he claims to spend 3 days a week thinking about the future, thinking about how things are going to show up inside the organization. No one else has got time to do that. So you have to make the space for it. So I don't know, I've got mixed feelings about it. I think the most important thing is for leaders really to engage with learning how to do this, and then recalibrating their time and their role around helping more of tomorrow come into today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, I think you're right. I think when I was doing some work around working from home, did a little survey and got some feedback, and it became clear that you're right. There's this mixture between, will everyone go back? Will organised some organisations just go back to normal, back to the way it was before, because they've got short memories, and that's why I think you kind of I had this kind of view that the bigger companies, some of the big companies will just go back to normal and they'll do nothing. They won't have seen this as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And then you'll have some of the companies who picked up on some of the smaller parts, maybe getting more people to work from home because there was a cost benefit, and they've implemented them and thought about that. But then you'll get the companies who go, this is an opportunity to evolve into something and bring the future forward. And I think it'll be those ones that really see the benefits of this of innovation and where we are, but I don't know how many that will be.
No.
I think, you know, you're right, it's that balance between giving them the space, giving them the right training, but how many would have done that versus we're ready to evolve, let's do it, let's bring the future forward now. Again, don't know the answer, but we shall see, I guess, for the next Facebook or wherever it turns up, as you say.
Yeah, that's right.
Few months. Okay, well, look, we have to. One of the other things we need to do is we need to pick a winner.
Oh yes, yeah.
Wonderful books. So who do you think he deserves?
Well, they're all good questions. I have to say, the one that is quite different for me, and I think is really important, is the one about the newly appointed manager. Because you can do all of this great stuff, but often if you're with a team or a bunch of teams that's stuck and doesn't want to move, that manager can unlock the future, I think, if they're very deliberate about how they go about doing that. And it's about being human. So I would say that this copy is going to, whose question was that?
Keith Merrin.
Keith Merrin.
Congratulations, Keith.
There you go, Keith. You're
won
going
a
to
book. I'll get in contact with you to, actually, I know Keith's address anyway, because I work with him quite often.
Oh, okay.
We can make that happen. Look, Elvin, it has been, I think we could talk for hours, couldn't we? There's so much to talk about. I mean, it's a fascinating and a brilliant place to be. So I'm sure you must love what you do.
I do.
Most days.
I do love my job.
Me too. Just want to thank you so much for agreeing to it, and we'll see what comes off the back of this, and might be an opportunity to dig in a bit deeper and do another one at some point.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. That would be really great.
All right, well, look, thanks again, and look after yourself, and cheerio.
Yeah, likewise. You too. Thanks, Simon.
No worries.